This meeting is going to be covering the departures training for the new departures manual and also the new departure approval system, DAS3. My name is Dorothy Mitchell. I work for a company called CACI, and we've been working with Highways England to create DAS3. And I also have with me Tom Bartley, who works for WSP and has been working on the departures manual. The session today is going to focus on a few things. First of all, Tom's going to take us through the departures manual training, and then we'll look at DAS3 tool itself. We'll have an introduction and a demonstration, and then we'll look at the training materials provided for both tools and also some key usage questions. So I'm going to hand over to Tom now for the first part of the presentation.
Thank you, Dorothy. So we'll move on. Before we get started, we're just going to start with a safety moment, as all Highways England activities do. And I thought the appropriate one for a session like this around information systems would be sedentary working. And I think we can all, in design organisations and consultancies, find that we spend a lot of time sat down, and that's not necessarily the healthiest thing to be doing. So the facts are that as soon as you sit, electrical activity in the legs muscles shut off, and calorie burning, I was surprised by this, drops to 1 per minute, and over time that gets worse and worse, so that cholesterol drops after 2 hours, and insulin effectiveness drops 24% after 24 hours, and people with sitting jobs, like I do, have twice the rate of cardiovascular disease as people with standing jobs. So, how can we be less sedentary? Public Health England recommends that we set timers so that every so often we go for a walk, that maybe that's to visit the bathroom, maybe it's to get a cup of tea, a glass of water, maybe it's to answer the phone and stand up whenever you're receiving phone calls. And the option to have a walking meeting often means that you have a more concise meeting and get to the point much quicker, but also it's good for the heart. This graphic just shows you how extensive the harm can be by spending too much of our days sat down, and visiting standingatyourdesk.com will give you some helpful advice as to how to be healthier in our sitting jobs. Great, so I'm going to just talk for about 15 minutes on the new departures manual that will be published. So WSP has been working with CACI and Highways England for a number of years on reviewing the departures process, what happens with departures from standards, where they add value and where sometimes they don't add value, and particularly conducting a lean exercise in 2015 to look at the end-to-end process and understand where the wastes are so that we can make them much more value-adding for Highways England. But to go back to first principles, I know we've got a diverse range of people on the call. What is a departure? It's the formal approval mechanisms for works on the strategic road network that don't comply with the standards. And by standards we of course mean the Design Manual for Roads and Bridges, the MCHW, we've got the interim advice notes, there's a plethora of other documents, sets that constitute the standards. And as suppliers it's our obligation to do our works in accordance with those standards, and where we can't conform with them, we need a departure. So there's 3 typical examples where a departure is used. The first is around value engineering. So often the standards might have a way of doing things, and through the good design processes we find that actually there's a more effective way to achieve the same outcomes. That might be in cost savings, it might be better customer service, and it might be a more efficient delivery process. There's also a very typical example, particularly for road geometry departures, where we just simply cannot fit a road in the space that's available within the design parameters, and we therefore need to go beyond the relaxations that are permitted and have a departure from standards to make the road fit. And the third is that we want to do something innovative. Typically, before the review of the DMRB, where things have been out of date, actually we're just using common practice that the standards haven't kept pace, but with the review of the DMRB that should improve. But also that the permission for doing something that isn't covered by standards, or the standards are out of, don't cover the modern ways of working, or something that's typically new, innovation is approved through a departure application. And the key thing about departures is that it's critical that they are fully considered, both from a business case and also from a safety case, and that is a full life cycle approach to that assessment and justification. Departures are not only used, the application is not only used for appraising departure and coming up with determining whether it's permitted or not. They can also be used in many years' time when, if there's an incident on the network, the coroner may call upon a departure application to see who took the decision that the design is what it is. So we've looked at the end-to-end process of departures and with three key outcomes that we're hoping to achieve. The first is to reduce the end-to-end time taken to determine a departure. That's including the bits before it gets to WebDAS and DAS, all the time that's taken to develop the application, understand how it fits in the design, etc. But also, once it's been submitted, to reduce the amount of time it takes from submission through to determination, so that you can know whether you can use it or not. The next is to look at the timeliness of submissions, and this is very much linked to project risk. We have seen, and there are typical examples, where a departure is submitted in detailed design. This is actually seeking permission for a decision that was taken at statutory powers or during option selection. What we want to make sure is that we aren't taking schemes forward on the assumption that a departure will be approved without verifying that with the technical specialists. The next thing we're focusing on is quality systems. Typically this is to make sure that departures are acceptable first time round. We see that a lot of departures get rejected because they've got missing information or they've just got quality issues with them. And the final thing is to improve visibility so that stakeholders can see the progress of a departure throughout its life cycle. This one is so that SES can see their upcoming workloads, that the technical partners can see where facilitation might be required, but also that designers can see the progress of their departures through the appraisal and determination process. So, what's happening? The departures manual that Dorothy has mentioned will be published alongside a new version of DAS. The departures manual sets out requirements and advice for the departures system. It's not part of the DMRB, but it is presented in the same format as the DMRB, so there are a very clear set of requirements and some advice for how to fulfill those. That will be phased in, so there will be some things that will be going live immediately with the new DAS system, i.e. the new processes that Dorothy will talk about later, and there'll be other things that will come along later with regards to a new tightening up to the application form, which I'll discuss in a bit later on. Dorothy is going to discuss the new version of DAS at length, but for those of you who aren't aware, this is Highways England's portal for, well, WebDAS is the portal for submitting departure applications and receiving it in the supply chain, and DAS is the departure approval system that's used within Highways England to monitor, to administer the approvals and keep the records so that they can be called upon later on. And the final thing that we're going to be undertaking is, throughout the coming year, we're going to be undertaking a number of activities with SES, major projects and the supply chain to look at where issues exist and do some much more softer people management type exercises to make sure that we can address the things that can't be hit with tools and manuals. So, the key changes that we think designers should be aware of. The first is that DAS is now set up such that you create the record of an anticipated departure as soon as it's identified in the project. So this might be at stage 0, even though you're not anticipating putting the departure in the application in until stage 4. But what we've got is a central register of all departures, whether they are processed or not. The next is about streamlining the processes for project manager approval. That effectively allows a project manager to approve the submission in parallel with the development of the departure application, and also for them to automatically accept the recommendation of the technical specialist. That should probably take, if used effectively, take about 2 or 3 weeks out of the approvals process. The next is where departures are rejected on quality grounds, that the resubmission is a slicker process as well. This is linked to the next point, which is an enhanced focus on quality management. The proposer is currently a role in the departure application form, but we've clarified what we expect the proposer to do and given them a very clear quality management remit with regards to departures. We've talked about this already, but the submission form has been reviewed and will be introduced to DAS so that we've got better content that allows appraisal, knowledge management, and also benefits management, so that we can do queries on what value do departures give to Highways England. We can't ask those questions of the database at the moment. How many departures are on a Category C scheme? We can't do that at the moment. So we're looking at better reporting, better tools throughout DAS, and the submission form has been reviewed accordingly. The next thing is around treatment of departures proportionate to project risk. This means, as I said earlier, that we look at, is a departure critical to a decision gate? Have we got a design fix? Have we got a stage gate review coming up? And are we going to take a decision that assumes a departure will be approved at this stage? Are we going to do something about that? Linked to that is the ability to get provisional agreement for critical departures at an early project stage. So this is only for departures that are critical to delivery. It's not detailed design, value engineering type questions that can be dealt with in phase 5 or 6, but critical things like that would affect the red line boundary for a scheme, etc. Technical specialists can give that record, and it's kept in DAS for visibility purposes. So, just to clarify the designer's responsibilities within the departures process, first of all is departure applications are of a high quality, and that they're written so that the technical specialist can appraise it in an effective way. I think there's kind of a respect question here, where it can sometimes feel like a box ticking exercise, but the technical specialists have a really important role from a technical assurance perspective, and helping them to conduct the appraisal will mean that your departures are more likely to get approved and that the process runs more smoothly. The next is to make sure that the life cycle impacts of the departure have been fully considered and that they represent a net benefit. The departures manual gives a thorough breakdown of all the aspects that we expect to be assessed and reported on in the departures application. The next is to make sure that the design is safe. This may involve departure applications being consulted with your principal designer and the proposer as well, but safety is the number one priority, as we're all aware at Highways England. And the final thing is to support the overall project risk management by handling departures at the right time in the project, so that we are confident that scheme delivery and benefits can be realised as anticipated. So that was just a very brief introduction. The manual will be made available through DAS and circulated through the various channels, whether it be peer-to-peer groups that people are involved in and various other senior leaders in the organisations. I'll pass over to Dorothy now, who will give you a demonstration and some training on how the new DAS tool will work.
So first of all, an introduction to DAS 3. DAS 3, as Tom mentioned, is going to be replacing WebDAS and DAS 2. This means it will be a single place where you can capture the full life cycle and audit trail of a departure. A key point is that it's supported in Firefox and Chrome, but Internet Explorer is not supported. The DAS 3 design has been really focused on the user interface to make it a much easier, slicker process for you as users. And as a result, the time and effort associated with creating and submitting a departure should be significantly reduced. There's also improved collaboration in the tool, and you can more easily collaborate between different stakeholders such as designers, project managers and specialists. It's fully integrated with Windows 10 and therefore is much more accessible. And finally, a new feature in DAS 3 is email notifications, and these will be automatically emailed to a user when they are assigned to a departure or a departure that they are working on has had a key change. The DAS3 rollout, as you will have seen in email communications, is a phased discipline rollout. On the screen you can see the different discipline go live dates, and we're starting with pavements on the 18th of February. The key point here is that please don't raise departures for a discipline that has not yet gone live, because the Highways England departments won't be live and so won't be able to process that departure. Now what we're going to do is start to take a look at the DAS3 tool itself, and I'll give you a demonstration. Please note that there is a great deal of YouTube tutorials and user FAQs provided, so don't feel that you need to write notes or anything during this demonstration. It will all be provided. Before we dive into the tool, we're just going to take a look at some of the key responsibilities for designer and proposer, which Tom covered. This content is taken directly from the departures manual, and there is a section on all the user roles in the departures manual. So the designer, they are responsible for identifying departures associated with their design and develop the associated applications, and also implementing the determination of a departure. The proposer, which is a key role in DAS3, is a senior technical expert who oversees a departure and then submits it for appraisal. They also verify that applications are assessed and fully justified prior to submission. The key distinction between designer and proposer in the tool itself is that only the proposer can submit the departure. Now a brief look at the departure process. On the left-hand side we have a timeline which is shown also in DAS3. The first stage in the timeline is when a need is identified, and this is when a designer creates and edits a departure application. Next we move to submission and preparation, where the proposer is able to submit the departure to the project manager for appraisal. After this point we move into Highways England territory, and what they will be doing is performing internal reviews on the departure. This will include project manager appraisals, technical specialist reviews and recommendations, and also from the authorising signatory. And finally, the Highways England project manager will then determine the departure. Again, this process is documented and each stage is documented in the departures manual. In the demonstration, we're going to look at a few key scenarios. I've focused this demo on the designer and proposer roles as suppliers. So the scenarios we're going to look at are creating and editing a departure, submitting a departure, withdrawing, then looking at how do we view the status of a departure and looking at the Highways England reviews, and finally performing rework on departure. So now I'm going to move over to the tool. This is the home page for DAS3, and I'm going to log in here as test designer for this demo. What we have now is the home page demonstrated for DAS3. If we look first of all at the header bar, on the top right you can see Test Designer. In the real world this will be your name, so for me it would say Dorothy Mitchell. This is because I'm logged in as a test account. The home button in the navigation bar always navigates to this home page wherever you are in the tool. The main screen of it is showing different departures that I am assigned to. You can only see a departure that you are assigned to, and you can see key information such as the departure ID, the title, the stage it's in, and who is currently assigned to the departure. What we're going to look at first of all is creating and editing a departure. To create a departure, I use New Departure in the header bar. I'm prompted that this is the action I want to take, and I press Confirm. What you can now see is the main page for a departure application that's open. On the left-hand side we have key data showing the departure ID, the status, and who it's assigned to. And beneath we have a navigation bar. So we have submission with the 3 areas that currently exist in the application. We have the diary, and then we have a specialist review. If we look quickly at the diary, this is the area in the departure that contains all correspondence for a departure. It's automatically populated with key changes such as a user change or a status change, and you can also directly edit comments in here and submit them to add correspondence to the diary. We'll look at some examples of that later. And the specialist review area is currently disabled because this is a new departure and doesn't have a specialist review, but we'll also look at when that's enabled later. If I return to the submission, the first area is the departure progress section. On the left you can see the people. These are the different roles that are applied to the departure, and on the right the different users that have been assigned. You can see that myself as the test designer, I'm the designer for the project, and also I'm assigned as current assignee. Here we have the timeline I spoke about, so we can see a time and date stamp telling me when I created the departure, and this, as the departure moves through the workflow, it will progress and show a different time and date stamp and which users did this. To navigate, you can either click on departure information in this navigation bar on the left, or you can simply scroll. So now we are creating a departure. We have a departure information page which contains key information that we need to populate. Please do note that I'm using a demonstration version of the tool, so this will be slightly different when it goes live, but the key information will remain the same. The red asterisk implies a compulsory field that must be completed. So I'm going to go ahead and populate this with some dummy information. What all these fields are, by the way, is provided in the departures manual, so specific information on what you should enter in each field will be provided. Some of the fields are drop-downs, so you can select from the drop-down using this arrow. That will also be true of the standard when we go live. One of the key fields is the departure summary field here, and in here you can enter a summary of your departure so that it's user-friendly and the project manager will understand what this departure is focused on. If I scroll down again, we have the third area, departure's location. A departure must have a minimum of one location assigned to it. You can have multiple locations. If I press add location, I need to provide a description, which is just a user-friendly term, and then an OSGB 36 grid reference. I mentioned you can add multiple locations, and you do this in the exact same way by using the Add Location button. To delete a location, you use the bin icon. Information about how and when you should use multiple locations is provided in the manual. Now I've populated the key information, I can begin drafting the submission. I'm warned that you are moving this departure application to submission in preparation. You have sufficient evidence available to develop a full submission. The HE Project Manager support will be required to progress the submission to specialist review. It is recommended to engage with the Project Manager as soon as possible. And you can add a comment. Press confirm and close. And you'll see that the timeline has updated there with the timestamp, and it's moved to Test Designer began preparing the detailed submission. The status in key data has also changed. The change that this has had is it's generated two new sections in the submission. Submission itself and the benefits, impacts and risks. These areas are the key areas that currently you see in the WebDAS tool. So these are the different titles you see. To edit this content, you can simply type directly into the submission. At the top, we have an edit bar where you've got key functionality such as number bullet points lists and other functionality. All this functionality is covered in a YouTube tutorial, so I won't cover it now, but that information is available. I can scroll through the document to different areas, and including things such as inserting images. Once you feel that you are happy with the application and it's ready to progress to the project manager appraisal stage, this needs to be done, as we discussed before, by a proposer. Currently in the people area, you can see that the proposer is unassigned. So the next thing we're going to look at is how to assign a user. In the departure progress area, there's this assign button. You simply click it and a pop-up appears. It's telling me that I may set these following roles. Different users have different permissions on which roles they can set, and these are the roles I can set as the designer. Here is the proposer role that I want to set. I simply click in it, type the name of the proposer, choose them from the drop-down, and press assign. Now you see that proposer has been assigned to test proposer, which is the username I entered. The stage that I'm at is that I'm happy with my application and I want the proposer to submit it. As a result, I also need to change the current assignee to the proposer. I do this in the same way, but now change the field current assignee. I delete myself and add the new proposer. Press assign, and it's also now assigned to the current proposer. Usually, that process of changing the current assignee happens automatically. It's only when moving between the designer and the proposer that you have to manually do that. Otherwise, the current assignee is changed when the project changes, when the application changes its stage. So now I'm going to log out and log back in as the proposer to show you how to submit. I've opened the same departure, and I'm now logged in as the test proposer. As before, I have all the same sections available, and I'm able to scroll through and review anything. So as the senior technical expert, you would come in and review this content, potentially add, you can add in the same way, so that you are happy with the application to go forward to HE appraisal. To actually submit the departure, you return again to departure progress area, and the proposer has a submit button available. You are recommending approval of this departure application. You confirm that you have used reasonable professional skill and care in the preparation of the departure. You confirm your understanding that approval of this application, if granted, is on the basis that the mitigation measures listed in the application are to be incorporated into the design. And I have two fields I need to fill out. The first is the name of the HE project manager. This again works in the same way as the assign button, and you can select here, and you can also provide a comment. Press submit, and on the timeline we can see that I have submitted the departure application and it's been assigned to project manager. As I just explained, note that it's been automatically reassigned to the project manager. With assignees, one of the new functionalities is that you get an email notification. I'm going to show you now an example of that. This is an example email which I've been sent automatically by DAS3 when I was assigned to a departure. Here, this sentence, you can see you have been assigned to the role of technical specialist for the departure application and the departure ID. This is really helpful as it means that users are automatically aware of departures that they've been assigned to so that they can go in and review those without you having to manually tell them. It's also worth noting at this point that the assign button, you can set multiple roles at the beginning of the departure. You don't have to do this at every stage. So when you create your departure, perhaps you already know the project manager and the proposer, you know the roles you want to assign. You can do that right away at the beginning, and then you won't have to do it when you move between each stage. So that can be part of the setup of the departure. If we return back to my scenarios, we've covered the first two. So the next scenario we're going to look at is how to withdraw a departure. I'm going to use the same departure we've just created as an example, and you'll notice the withdraw button. You can withdraw a departure at any point in its life cycle as long as it hasn't been determined. I click withdraw, enter the reason for my withdrawal, and press confirm and close. The timeline updates to say that test proposer withdrew this departure, and the status is changed to withdrawn. The next set of scenarios we're going to focus on are how to look at the reviews that Highways England have made. As Tom said, one of the key improvements with this new departures manual and DAS3 is that there's transparency of the progress of the process throughout the whole application lifecycle. It's important to know that whilst you can look at the reviews Highways England have made and you're able to correspond in the diary, the determination is the final determination for the departure, so no action should be taken on a recommendation. I'm going to log in as the test designer to show some examples that I've made. From the home page, I can see different departures that are assigned to me. The first one that we're going to look at is the view of the PM appraisal. I click it to open it, and as the designer for this, I'm interested to see how I've progressed. The first thing I do is open the diary to see what stage we're at. Here I can see that on the 28th of January, the test project manager supported this departure application. Also, they added a comment. I would approve this departure based on the review provided by the technical specialist. On the right hand side I can see the status change. It moved from PM appraisal to the next Highways England stage, which is a DAS admin approval stage. Also, from the submission page, on the timeline I can also see this information. The next example I'm going to show you is looking at the specialist review. Again, I open up the diary to see how my departure is progressing, and I can see that a specialist review was provided, and now this is enabled. I click it, and in here this is the specialist review area. Firstly, we have different comments provided by the specialist submission point, the technical specialist, any authorising signatories and consultant comments. So you're able to come in and look at these. If I scroll down, the second section is the recommendation. So this is the technical specialist recommendation, it is not the determination of the departure. We'll now look at how you view the final determination for a departure. I'm returning to the home page, and I have an example here which is in stage approved. If I open it, you can see that on the timeline it tells me Test Project Manager approved the departure, and also the status has changed to approved. Again, you can open the diary and see more information. So in this example, they provided a comment saying that they approve following support from the technical specialist and the authorising signatory. The final scenario to look at is how to perform rework on a departure. As Tom mentioned, we now have functionality within the tool where the specialist can send the departure application back to the designer for rework. If this has happened, if I return to the login as the proposer, both the proposer and the designer will be able to see that. I'm only logging in as the proposer because I want to show you how to resubmit that same departure, and the proposer is the only role that can submit it. So for a rework example, I have an example here, and my stage is set as rework required, and it's been reassigned to the proposer. This is also shown in the timeline. So I've come in as the proposer and I want to do this rework. First of all, I look at the specialist review, and in here the specialist will have left rework requirements as a comment. I can also open the diary, where they may have provided an additional comment. Here they've said rework is required to provide sufficient evidence for the departure. See detail in the specialist review area. If you had any comments or questions, you could enter these directly in here and correspond with the specialists. To make the rework changes, you simply open the application and type your rework as you would when editing. Once you're happy, scroll to the top, and where we had submit previously, we now have the button rework complete. When you press this button, it will prompt you saying the rework has been completed. You are returning this application to the specialist submission point for review. When you add a comment and press confirm and close, this will move it back to the specialist review area, and Highways England will re-perform the reviews based on your rework. Those are the key scenarios. So now we're going to look at a couple of questions about DAS 3. First of all, what training materials do we have? I mentioned earlier that there
was a question around attachments.
Okay, absolutely. I can show you how to upload an attachment. So in this example, let's say that I have a particular image I want to upload as an attachment. You do this by using the attach icon on the side here, a safe paperclip. You click it and you've got two options. Either you can drag a file there, or you can click this and it will open a Windows Explorer. Let's say that this bridge image that I have here is one that I want to attach. I press open and it uploads. The file is here, and I can also provide a description. You can delete this attachment by pressing delete, and this is a download attachment. So if you've opened a departure that somebody else has made attachments to, you press this and it will download onto your machine, and then you can open that attachment. So, training materials. As I mentioned, we've got a number of YouTube tutorials for DAS 3. These are short, bite-sized videos that focus on how to do things, and there will also be some videos for the departures manual. I'm going to show you a few of those in a moment. There are also FAQ and guidance PDFs for the DAS 3 and also for the departures manual. You access all this content directly through DAS. In DAS, there will be a help button in the home bar, and from this there will be a drop-down menu provided. This is a development example, which is why it's static, but also why it's only got DAS 3 content there. There will also be departure manual content. So, if you clicked on the video tutorials link, it would open up the Highways England playlists for DAS 3. So this is the YouTube page I was talking about, which has got playlists focused on the different roles within DAS. So here you can see we've got DAS for designers, DAS for proposers, DAS for specialists, and different videos available for those roles. You come in, you click the role that you are, and on the right hand side you can see that there's a number of different videos within this playlist. If you look at some of these as examples, we've got when do I get an email notification, how to add attachments to a submission, and how to provide rework. They're short, bite-sized videos that actually answer your direct questions on the usage of the tool, so hopefully will be useful. I also mentioned some of the PDFs. So one of the PDFs you will get is the DAS 3 user FAQs, and this will cover content that are common questions but aren't focused really on videos. So things like, how do I reset my password? How do I request a DAS account? And there will also be a direct link to the departures manual and its training material. There is also an email address shown on the screen now, which is for DAS admin. So if there's some issue that you have that is not covered in the help content, please email that email address. By the way, that email address is also provided in the FAQ guide, so you will have access to that. Now we're going to look at some more general questions, and these are also covered in the FAQ guide. First of all, how do I access DAS? All enabled WebDAS accounts are going to be transferred to DAS 3. As with WebDAS, you require a NUNS account. If you don't have access, either you don't have WebDAS account or you're not sure if you have a NUNS account, please contact that email address and request. In terms of the actual link to DAS 3, it will be provided in the release communications, which will start coming out from the 18th of February. When should I use DAS 3? As we mentioned, there is a discipline phased release. So, after the discipline release date, all new departures should be submitted in DAS 3. If you have a departure that has been submitted and it exists in DAS 2, it should complete its life cycle in DAS 2. Once the discipline has been released, if you have a departure that exists in a WebDAS scratchpad but it has not been submitted, you should recreate that and submit it in DAS 3. So the key thing is that all new departures after the discipline has been released should be released in DAS 3. Naturally, the next question is about migration and searching of departures. There's two areas here. There's today, which is before migration. So, currently, departures that have been determined in DAS 2 should be searched and viewed in WebDAS. Departures that have been determined or created in DAS 3 should be searched and viewed in DAS 3. This is because migration between the two systems hasn't yet happened. Secondly, we have after that migration. So, the migration will take place after the complete release of DAS 3 across all of the disciplines. What we will then do is migrate determined departures from DAS 2 to DAS 3. And this will happen on a set date, on a defined schedule. So that might be, as an example, from the 1st of January weekly. That date and schedule have not yet been defined, and it will be defined when we have completed the full release, and we will then communicate that migration process. So that was the main information I wanted to cover for DAS 3. So what are the key points? DAS 3 will be phased released by discipline from February the 18th, as in the plan. DAS 3 is supported in Firefox and Chrome, and Internet Explorer is not supported. And there are a wide range of tutorials and support available on YouTube and also as PDF documents. So finally, if you need a DAS 3 account, there's the email that you should contact. And that's also true of a NUNS account. And if you have any feedback or suggestions or questions for Tom and myself, please email the iig_das@caci.co.uk.